Welcome to Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. You are going to hear the stories from the eclectic life of a guy who is a professional counselor, a family man, a SWAT team chaplain, outdoor enthusiast, a guy involved with ropes, 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, a chaotic Jedi, and who is a recipient of an honorary doctorate from the University of Adversity. Using these stories, we take the facts lead to concepts, and from the concepts we make a variety of life applications. Just a caveat about the facts. Most of the time we will tell you the facts just the way it happened, but once in a while we'll give you the facts the way other people remember how it happened, and that usually includes a tablespoon of embellishment. No harm is meant, just good, clean fun for educational purposes. Please subscribe and share this with your friends. As always, we thank you for keeping up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. Faulkner University introduces the Master of Arts in Christian Counseling and Family Ministry. Many youth ministers are not well prepared for the complex challenges facing youth, parents, and families today. This program is not designed to fulfill any requirements toward becoming a licensed counselor, but it is designed to equip the career youth and family minister to do just that, minister to families, by integrating prevention-oriented counseling skills and intervention strategies within a church setting. The courses include, but are not limited to, counseling skills, counseling couples and families in crisis, family dynamics, human intimacy and sexuality, parent and character education, as well as church assessments. All courses may be completed online from the convenience of your home or workplace and at the time that fits your schedule. Most courses are only 8 weeks long. There is a 60% tuition discount for members of the Churches of Christ. Visit the website faulkner.edu/KGST. KGST stands for Curley Graduate School of Theology. That's faulkner.edu/KGST, or contact Jimmy Holland, Director of Biblical Studies Recruiting, at jholland, HOLLAND, jholland@faulkner.edu with any questions or to find out about the eligibility requirements for the tuition discount. Faulkner University is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. The patient is nervously sitting on the table. The doctor comes in carrying a folder, obviously has the results of the test. He sits down across from the patient. He's looking down at the paper. The patient is nervous. He says, Doc, what is it? And the doc looks at him and says, I just don't know how to say this. The patient says, well, you've got to say it. You're tell me what it is. And the doctor says, I'm not sure I know how to say this. And the patient grabs him and shakes him and says, you've got to tell me. And the doctor looks at the paper and says, well, is it laboratory or laboratory? Anyway, your laboratory or laboratory tests are fine. You can go home. I just didn't know how to say this. So is it Joe Box or Job Ox? You know, those big metal boxes that you see on the back of work trucks. They're either on the back of a flatbed truck or they're in the bed of a big pickup truck, and they have written on it JOBOX. They come in various sizes. They look like the modern version of a strong box from the old stagecoach days. And what they do is they contain the tools of the various trades. They use those boxes because they're for the job, and the various tools are in them, and you offload them onto your job site, and then you don't have to pack up your truck every day. You just throw everything in the box, close it, and lock it down, and it's secured. We needed one of those for the ropes course up on Keel Mountain, and I bought a giant version. The official name of the JOBOX is actually pronounced Job Box. It's not Joe Box or Job Ox, it's Job Box. But some clever guy in the graphics department left out the second B. A B I could have used in high school or in college, but this guy just left out running around the universe and is probably somewhere now either being unused or sleeping under a bridge. Several of us were sitting in the student common area, and there was a young lady in the group, and she was majoring in being a Karen. The conversation drifted or derailed into academics, and she promptly proclaimed, "I've never made a B," to which I responded, "Me neither," but we meant different things by it. It turns out these large metal boxes, the term job box is sort of like crescent wrench. The crescent wrench is actually just an adjustable wrench, but Crescent is a trade name that either has better marketing or is more widely known. You can buy one of these big metal boxes, and on the front of it can be written Cobalt, Rigid, DeWalt Tough Box, Tradesman. The one we bought was actually called a job site. It was big bird yellow, 60 inches by 24 inches by 22 inches deep. It had two places for padlocks and openings at the bottom, built on these little feet that you could slide the forks of a forklift under and move it around on your job site. We unloaded ours on Kill Mountain and attached it to the base of a tree using a steel cable. And we used this box to store our ropes course equipment. Now, when we moved the ropes course operations to Huntsville to the Wellstone campus, we moved our box with us. So for over 20 years, this box has stood out in the weather, and it has protected all the things we used on a ropes course. It protected our ropes, our helmets, our equipment bags, our first aid bag, extra construction staples, replacement pulleys, cords, rope logs, markers, bug spray, wasp spray, sunscreen, the bags we used for our different elements, the keys to the high course and the keys to the swing. It even kept a ninja sword. We would stack our ladders behind it or on top of it and lock them up with steel cables also. To my knowledge, no one has ever tried to steal the steel box. When the group that renovated the Wellstone buildings that was just south of where the ropes course was, when that group left town, they left town with our ladders. Stealing the ladders from Kill Mountain would have been a monumental task. Most of our ladders were down at the bottom, at the high course, at the bottom of the steep hill, and they were chained to a tree. We used 2 ladders to access the high course and 1 ladder to use on the giant swing. One would have had to know, first of all, where these things were and been willing to hike in and hike out with the ladders. There wasn't really a good way to access with a vehicle much bigger than a four-wheeler. When we moved to the Wellstone campus and I first locked the ladders up, my daughter said, "Aren't you worried somebody's going to steal this?" I told her people lazy enough to steal were too lazy to work hard enough for those ladders. Well, every time I've had to load those ladders at my house the day before or the day of a ropes course, I remind myself of how wrong I was. The Wellstone course was easily accessible, and those guys stole my ladders. They used a grinder and cut through the steel cable. They stole 2 8-foot A-frame ladders, 2 10-foot straight ladders, a 22-foot extension ladder, and my prized aluminum 40-foot ladder. But they did not steal the giant job site box. When we closed the course, I left the box for a few months. It was my job to dismantle the course. We closed the course in 2020, and over the course of 2020 to 2026, I've had a biceps tear. I've had a triceps tear. I've had a bone spur in my shoulder that had to be surgically removed, and I've had all the abdominal surgeries, and all those things made climbing these 40-foot utility poles and removing cable just wasn't really high on my list. In fact, it was low on my to-do list. Eventually, the Virginia Creeper will come in and claim and hide the course. I did manage to disconnect all the guy cables. I managed to disconnect and take home the zipline cable before my medical marathon began, but that's as far as I got. Eventually, between surgeries, I would go with Troy and retrieve the big 5-foot steel box. We would cut it loose with a grinder, and then we would bring it to Casa de Jones. It was going to be repurposed as a gardening box for the lady gardener. But as it happened, I got to keep the box. I kept the box and placed it in my garage gym workshop, which is the only square footage, save this podcast studio, that I have any actual control over on the property known as the Jones-006. I decided to save this metal box from the indignities of mundane gardening tools and use it to store my rock climbing equipment. That rock climbing equipment has long lived just piled up in a series of plastic trunks on the shelves in the attached garage next to my hunting stuff. I did a little modification. I reinforced the sides of the box so I could put some eye bolts and hangers in it. And I stretched a cord across the middle, suspended it right across the middle of the box, and systemically hung all the stuff that had just been piled into the bottom of a plastic trunk. All the gear that we have owned and we've used in our lead climbing. The quick draws, the hexes, the tricams, the chocks, the ascenders, the atriers, the camming devices, carabiners, figure eights, gree-grees, reversos, climbing shoes, webbing, slings, helmets, ropes. All of this was stashed now in this giant metal box and organized in a way that was visible and usable and accessible. And I was doing this. It struck me how unused this stuff has been over the past 4 or 5 years. I looked at this very impressive collection of stuff. And this is just my personal stuff. This is my personal rock climbing stuff. This doesn't include the ropes course equipment from the last 20 years of programming. Now, when you're running a ropes course, you retire the soft stuff. The harnesses and the ropes have to be retired, every 5 to 7 years. But the carabiners and the pulleys and the stainless steel shear reduction tubes and the Milan Rapide rings, all of the carabiners, I've got 20 years worth of that stuff hanging in the equipment room in my shop. But this is just my personal climbing stuff. And when I die, and they open this box, most people will not have a use for any of it or know what most of it was used for or even how it was used. Jackie has a vast collection of out-of-service carabiners and quick draws. For whatever reason, we either dropped them or replaced them, or we'd moved to a bent gate rather than a straight gate, or we replaced, the spring gates. You should see the look she gets from people in airports and hotels when she's moving her luggage and they see her bags clipped together with high-end rock climbing equipment. It's normal to see, people use these little keychain carabiners you get from Walmart, but you look up and you see somebody who's attached 2 suitcases together with a black diamond quick draw, or you see a black diamond carabiner on the leash of a Spanish water dog, not a Walmart carabiner, but a UIAA approved aluminum 22 kilonewton carabiner on a dog leash. That'll get you some looks in an airport or the hotel lobby. Now, when you first start climbing, you have nothing. You have one rope and you use it as a top rope. You have a couple of carabiners, you have a rappel device, and you have a few slings. In fact, in the early days, you used the carabiner as your rappel device. And you had a rope and you had a harness that you tied out of a piece of webbing or out of rope. As you progress, as you stay in the game, your first big purchase is a pair of specialty shoes. Because once you start getting better at climbing, you need better shoes. And then you get to buy a pre-made harness. I retire my harnesses about every 5 years. I remember on my 50th birthday ordering a work harness and a regular climbing harness and thinking this will be the last harness I buy. Well, I bought 2 new harnesses when I turned 55, and I got new harnesses when I turned 60. But you start collecting gear. And over the years, the gear begins to accumulate. And it gets used for a while. I mean, you use all this stuff. You start placing gear and you start building anchors and you take seminars and you go on trips and you use it all. And you use it all for a while. But then you get hurt. You get sick. You get busy. You get tired. You get old. Or you get scared. I have a completely different collection of gear gear that I use not for life support, but for creating mechanical advantage systems when I'm working with trees or moving large objects. And I got that gear from people who got scared. They went climbing with me or with somebody else and decided they needed to have all their own toys. And so they went out and they overbought. They bought too much stuff. And then they went climbing by themselves and they took one good lead fall, or they got one good scare, or they had one good close call, and they either sell or give their gear away. I was standing out there looking at the big box, the big steel box, the unused box. And I realized the stuff in my garage will never be used up. I don't climb well enough or often enough anymore to use it to its potential. It will spend more of its existence hanging in a job site box than it will be hanging on a rock site. And I really don't think it's a waste. All of it has been used and used well in some form or fashion. It just hasn't been used to its full potential. And it's not a waste. It just feels like it's a shame. Standing out there, organizing what amounts to the history of my climbing career, not my future. Standing out there organizing the history of my climbing career left me with a small sense of melancholy. All this gear, all this equipment, all the potential that this stuff has and still has for use, and it will never be used to its fullest. If I had a Padawan learner, I would bequeath it to them after I quit my career or after I die. I just give it to them. Troy and I share the stuff. I can't give it to Troy. Part of it's his. And if I quit using it, he will too. And when and if he goes and climbs Half Dome, which is one of his goals, the gear he uses will be supplied by Yosemite Mountaineering School. And the only personal gear he'll need is his harness, his shoes, his helmet, and his personal protection leash called a daisy chain. I stood up there looking in this unused box. Not that the box was unused, but the stuff in it is largely unused. What used to be and what could have been. That probably explains grief and regret and disappointment. But it is more accurate to use those two constructs to describe some type of failure. Maybe not an abject failure, but just failure to thrive. Maybe not failure in the sense of a regrettable tragedy, but just in the sense of not getting all the value out of something that still has value. Kindness, compassion, service, discipline, selflessness, benevolence, forgiveness. I used to use all this stuff before it got old, before I got old, before I got tired, before I got hurt, before I got scared, before I got confused, before I got discouraged, disappointed, or disillusioned too many times. And now that stuff, I still have it. I still have access to it. I still know how to use it. It just remains in the unused box. Friendship, marriage, health, commitment, Christianity, any hobby. We used to when we first met, when we first married, when I first started, when I first began, when I became. Do you remember the fire of being in love? Do you remember the early stages of commitment? Do you remember the drive to be better at something or just the best you could be? As a climber, a golfer, an archer, a shooter, a Christian, a spouse, or just a person. But once we let it slip, once we get hurt or tired or confused or disillusioned, Once we start putting it in a big steel unused box rather than keeping it in our house or our car or just having it readily accessible, something we use and use often, once it's something that takes too much effort to get out, to pack up, or to use, once it's something you have to think about to do rather than constantly thinking about doing, once it reaches that status, it's already in a box. And unless we're careful, we'll never get it out. And it will never get to be what it used to be or what it could have been. It starts with the idea of using an unused box. But the box itself is now being used. So it is no longer an unused box, but it just bears the label that describes the contents. Unused. It keeps, it hides, it protects, it seals off or locks up the stuff we used to use and probably could or still use. Stuff we used to use but no longer need should be thrown away and not even kept. But if it still has a use, if it's still useful, and if we should still use it, it does not need to be in a box labeled unused. The mission of Heritage Christian University is simple. They aim to advance the churches of Christ by equipping servants through undergraduate and graduate programs. Heritage Christian University produces effective communicators of the gospel, focusing on evangelism and a commitment to Scripture. Heritage Christian University is accredited by the Association for Biblical Higher Education and offers the following degrees: Associate of Arts in Biblical Studies, Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Studies, Master of Arts, Master of Ministry, and Master of Divinity. Since 1968, Heritage Christian University, formerly International Bible College, has offered affordable degrees in biblical studies, allowing graduates to thrive in their ministries without the burden of loan debt after graduation. For more information about Heritage Christian University, visit www.hcu.edu. That's 3 W's and a dot. hcu.edu. Heritage Christian University is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure.